Massacre Origins. The lesser-known villainous brother of Batwing is a terrifying entity. Massacre was part of DC's New 52 era and was introduced as the first nemesis of the Batman Incorporated African superhero Batwing. His first appearance was in the introductory arc for Batwing, created by writer Judd Winnick and illustrated by artist Ben Oliver. Massacre was the perfect foe for the character of Batwing, who was a battle-hardened, broken former soldier who upheld righteous ideals but constantly bore the weights of his past deeds. In his debut arc, Massacre had a massive presence in the plot, and the storytelling and artwork in those issues were stellar. Let us understand the origins of this menacing character and explore his involvement in Batwing's story. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The origins and backstory of Massacre. Massacre was not always a killing machine. He was but an innocent boy who was unfortunate enough to be born in the war-riddled region of Congo before they acquired their freedom from the unruly leaders and abundant warlords. Named Isaac Zavimbe by his parents, Massacre is the brother of David Zavimbe, also known as Batwing, or in his civilian identity, Officer Zavimbe. Isaac has no recollection of who his parents were, much like David. All he remembers is a couple of happy memories that he recollected as a child from time to time, at times when he reminisced about his long-lost parents. The parents of the Zavimbe brothers were unfortunate victims of the war that broke out in Congo, leaving the two as each other's only remaining family at a very tender age. Not long after their parents' demise, the brothers were kidnapped by General Keita, which was the norm for the region as warlords had to acquire all the lands they could get in the war for attrition. The two were forced to join the ranks of the army of General Keita, amongst other child soldiers that the warlord had harbored. Although being children, the brothers were exposed to countless raids and missions as they committed terrible atrocities to appease the general and gain his praise. The brothers were termed the Dragonflies by the rest of the army. Keita would often receive reports from his informants of the Dragonflies' unstoppable presence on the battlefield. The brothers were prodigal in doing what they did, but with one major flaw: their humanity. They would never hurt the women or children of the villages they would raid, even if it meant not following the direct orders from the general. In one such instance, Keita got a report that the Dragonflies raided an entire village themselves, and when the rest of the army was about to make the women and children suffer, the two brothers beat 7 of their own men and 40 plus of the other child soldiers of their ranks to the ground to stop them from touching the innocent. Regardless, the general saw great potential within the two brothers and promoted them to be of higher rankings in his army. With the only father figure in their life being Keita, the two would blindly follow his orders and commit sins under his name until one fateful day. While on a mission to eliminate one of Keita's many enemies, the brothers disobeyed a direct order to blow up the village, as it meant suffering for the women and children. David attempted to reason with his general, but he was shunned as Keita's motives were clear. In an attempt to disrupt their plans, Isaac opened fire and blew their cover, effectively ruining their mission. Back at camp, with an unsuccessful mission at hand, Keita was furious at Isaac and stated that he knew this day would come. He punished Isaac for his disobedience, while David cried in the back, asking for mercy. But Isaac had enough, and he got up from the ground and hit Keita with a rock directly on the top of his head. Outraged at the kid's audacity, Keita picked up his machete and slashed Isaac's chest with his first swing and took out his eye with the second. Effectively neutralized, Isaac was thrown off the cliff and left to die and rot in the wilderness, while David wept. Following this, David fled from the camp and swore revenge on the warlord. Unbeknownst to David, who had later come back to the camp to abduct and leave Keita in their enemy's possession to take his revenge, Isaac had survived. The two brothers, who were extremely close to each other and were each other's only family, were now separated, with one of them thinking the other was killed. In the following days, Isaac used his training, rage, and determination to survive out in the wild, even with his severe injuries. He became a deranged wild child out in the jungle until he was found by Josiah Cone, a former member of the Kingdom, basically Africa's Justice League. Josiah nursed the kid back to health and took him under his guidance to groom him into becoming a killing machine for his own agendas. Josiah sought revenge upon the other members of the Kingdom for their terrible deeds of sacrificing thousands of lives and giving protection to the undeserving former leader of Congo, only to end the war and be fabled as heroes. With a clear agenda and a formidable weapon in the making, Josiah trained Isaac for years to come. After decades, Josiah had completed Isaac's training for him to become a professional criminal. Not only did Josiah train Isaac to become a killing machine, but he also instilled with him the rage that he had against the members of of the kingdom. With crystal clear ambitions and direct orders to follow from the Redeemer, Isaac wore a mask resembling a skull and little to no armor, and was sent out on his first mission to eliminate a member of the kingdom under the moniker of Massacre. Exploring the major comic book story arc featuring Massacre, aka Isaac Zavimbe. Sadly, Massacre barely received much coverage, and does not have many appearances under his name. He appeared in Batwing's introductory arc, and was not explored further in the continuity of Prime Earth in the DC universe. But as we mentioned before, Massacre as a character had a heavy impact even with such few appearances, and that is what makes him so unique and refreshing. Let us go through the whole arc featuring Massacre. The story starts when Batwing gets a taste of the path of vengeance when he first visits a crime scene decorated with corpses of members of gangs responsible for drug trafficking killed by Massacre. Investigating further, Batwing used the technology his benefactor Batman bestowed upon him to determine and follow through with the people that were killed at the crime scene. With Batman and Matuba, Batwing was able to identify one of the victims as Earthstrike, a former member of the Kingdom. Previously, David had tried to persuade his fellow officers to investigate the case to find the killer. He would regret this dearly, as Massacre's next step was to kill a plethora of the police officers on his trail and write "Stay away" on the walls with their blood. As David sees the warnings and the decapitated heads of his precinct on the floor, he is stabbed through the chest from behind by the perpetrator, Massacre himself. As David fought through the pain with only his will to survive, Massacre praised his spirit and stated that it was his honor to kill him at last. Before the murderer could deliver the final blow on David, however, he was interrupted from behind by Officer Kia Okuru, a friend of David. In this confrontation, Massacre was exposed to open fire from a bunch of officers, but he was able to survive. Not only survive, Massacre killed each and every one of those officers, ambushing them, except for Kia. The reason for sparing Kia's life is later revealed to be that it was against Massacre's moral code to kill women and children. As David regains consciousness, he is informed by Matu that he was out for 2 weeks, and his injuries were lethal. Ignoring Matu's request for him to rest, David drugged Matu to follow Massacre, as he had a slight idea where his next attack would be. When we see Massacre infiltrating a classroom, asking the teacher to instruct the children to run away. After the teacher complies, Massacre attacks him, stating that he will pay for the crimes he was committed. The teacher then fights back, revealing himself to be Thunderfall, another former member of the Kingdom. Massacre is blasted by a beam of electricity by Thunderfall, but he gets straight back up and goes on the offensive once again. As Thunderfall starts charging up his attack to deal devastating damage, Massacre uses his machete to chop his left arm off with one tough swing. As Thunderfall writhes in agony and Massacre gets ready to finish him off, he is interrupted by Batwing, who is still in a fragile condition due to his injuries and only wishes to evacuate Thunderfall to safety, knowing he does not stand a chance against Massacre. As the battle between the two ensues, Batwing uses his technology to gain distance and buy time so he can bring Thunderfall to safety. But despite all his efforts, Massacre keeps coming back. Batwing even uses tasers to keep him down, but to no avail. Massacre gains the upper hand once again, while Batwing is down on the ground. Thunderfall interrupts once again, and uses all of his remaining power to hit Massacre with a big bolt of electricity before collapsing to the ground to save Batwing. Successful at keeping Massacre down with help, Batwing rushes Thunderfall to the nearest hospital as the latter takes his final breaths. Regardless of his efforts, Thunderfall dies in front of Batwing, adding another successful mission in Massacre's books. Afterwards, no one is aware of Massacre's whereabouts until he makes his presence felt once more. Batwing goes to investigate another crime scene. This time, Massacre killed Dawnfire of the Kingdom and hung her body up as a way of showcasing his terror to the onlookers. Understanding the pattern of the killer, Batwing prepared himself for his next attack. He took on his regular identity as Officer Zavimbe and requested to be tasked with the security for the event at the headquarters of the Kingdom. The only former member present at the celebration from the Kingdom was Josiah Cone, and Batwing presumed that Massacre would make him his next target, not knowing that he was behind all of this madness in the first place. To be deceptive with his plans, Josiah orchestrated an attack on himself. He employed the service of local thugs, dressed them up as Massacre, and provided them with terrifying weaponry to launch an attack at the event and destroy the headquarters. His plan was to make it look like there was an unsuccessful attempt at his life, so that no one would suspect his involvement in the crimes of Massacre. Following this, no one suspected Cone, and his plan worked flawlessly, apart from the fact that Batwing was able to interrogate one of the attackers and track down Massacre's presence all the way to Egypt. Daniel Balogun, who resided in Egypt, was his next target. Daniel was an international business entrepreneur and was tending to prospective clients when Massacre arrived. Massacre then stated how he knows of his past personality. He mentioned that he was Steelback, the man-machine of the kingdom. Before the assassination could take place, Batwing appeared in his flight suit, which was made solely for fast travel. The two then started their second confrontation, with Batwing at a heavy disadvantage once again. But before the battle began, Massacre uttered the phrase, "We honor them all in blood," which made Batwing suspect that it was General Keita under that mask. Batwing swiftly used the tools at his disposal and lit Massacre on fire, but in an act of showcasing great perseverance for his cause, Massacre endured the flames on his body and used them to light the bus on fire, inside which was his target hid for safety. Batwing devoted his whole attention to saving the people from the fire, and Massacre used this time to escape from the area. With Daniel rescued, Batwing was able to gain intel on where his enemy's next attack would take place, which was none other than Gotham City. Batman employed the aid of Robin, Nightwing, Batgirl, and Alfred to locate the next possible targets. After much research, Robin and Nightwing arrived at the place where Massacre should be heading, but they were too late, as when they arrived, they had already been 2 more casualties, Razorwire and Staff. Massacre then revealed himself alongside an ally sporting Steelback's exosuit. Batwing and Batman soon joined the battle. The Bat family focused on taking down the armored machine, while Batwing focused on fighting Massacre. As their fight raged on, the two talked about their ideals, and Batwing stated how he was fighting with purpose against the enemy, which he thought to be General Keita, but when he heard the name being mentioned, Massacre's rage grew further as he was disgusted at the thought of being compared to the likes of him. Batwing was able to gain the upper hand soon, and with the flurry of stiff punches, he was able to push Massacre back to the ground while also damaging his mask. With Massacre's inability to continue fighting, Batwing had won, but once he opened his eyes to see who he was fighting, his heart skipped a beat. He was astonished to see Isaac, his long-lost brother, who he thought was killed. Batwing was stunned, and he instantly calmed down and said the name Isaac, with doubts in his mind. Isaac was too dismayed to believe that Batwing was able to recognize him. Meanwhile, the Bat family was able to handle the machine following Daniel's guidance, but Josiah had installed a failsafe in the robot, which would make it self-destruct. Before Batwing could continue the conversation with Isaac, he was told to evacuate by Batman. Unable to do that in time, the brothers were caught in the explosion. Following this, Batwing traced the signal to where the suit was connected, and he tracked down Josiah Cone and took him into custody after interrogating him for his purpose. As their final interaction ended, Massacre went into hiding, and without any righteous purpose to follow any longer, he was aimless and left his bloody ways behind him. What makes him so powerful? Isaac Zavimbe is not just another ordinary human. He and his brother David possessed unfathomable talents from a very young age. Although Massacre had no superpowers of his own, much like Batman, he was a human with exceptional skills and power. Massacre proved his mastery of weapons combat at an extremely young age, as he was able to raid villages and come out without a scratch with the help of his brother. They even beat up 7 men and 40 young soldiers, who were their age to begin with, to stop them from committing crimes against women and children when they were just kids. Through years of training and exposition to the most challenging environments out there, Isaac Zavimbe had become a pure specimen who had great determination and perseverance to back up his skills and talents. Massacre is an excellent swordsman, with the choice of his weapon being a machete, which he uses to slice up his enemies in half or decapitate them flawlessly. He does not have an extensive arsenal of weapons, and has never been shown to use any other equipment other than his machete and the clawed gloves that he uses to add an extra effect to his punches. The only armor he uses is a piece of body cladding that provides him with a high degree of durability, but again, much of his durability comes from his tenacity and will. Massacre was able to take down an entire police precinct single-handedly. That is an admirable feat considering that the police are armed and trained in combat in their own right. He was even able to fight off an ambush by more police officers right after, and still came out triumphant. This instance and many others showcase Massacre's unbelievable capability in hand-to-hand combat. He also showcases incredible speed and reflexes, as he is able to dodge the bullets being fired at him and also close the distance between him and the police force. His armor is able to withstand short bursts of attacks from small firearms, which allows him to be a bit reckless when fighting against guns. Apart from his armor, he has an extremely high threshold of pain, as he is shown to be resilient even after being tased, burned, falling from heights, and being punched in the face by the strongest of individuals. Complementing all the previously mentioned attributes is his strength. For a human, Massacre is way too powerful. He is able to easily punch a hole through a brick wall for intimidation purposes. His punches have left people with broken jaws in many of the various crime scenes he has prepared. Worst of all, his attacks have left Batwing stunned multiple times. Before he donned the moniker of Massacre, Isaac was an excellent marksman, and he was able to take down his enemies before they could even get a clear shot at him. The Dragonflies, Isaac and David, were also complimented by General Keita for their capabilities of using stealth in their missions. He mentioned how if they did not want to be seen, no one would be able to track them. It is safe to say that Massacre maintained these attributes even after he grew older and used them to his advantage. Conclusion: Massacre was never an inherently evil character. He was but a lonely child who was taken under someone's wing as he had no one else to turn to. Overall, one can understand how his character came to be what he was, and no one can blame him for it. He is one of the most misguided personalities who has had a traumatic past life, but still holds his moral code to not make the innocent suffer. All the crimes he committed were the machinations of Josiah Cohn, and Isaac believed that he was only doing the right thing by making the betrayers of the people, the members of the kingdom, suffer and pay for their sins. Even when Massacre faced off against the police force, he left all but one officer alive, which was Kia Okuru, the only confirmed female officer. With his tragic backstory, his cool but menacing suit, his ideals, and his combat skills, Massacre is one of the most complete villains and performed his role as Batwing's first enemy for his introductory arc perfectly. If you have not read Batwing's comics yourself, we hope that this video was enough to make you want to visit this masterpiece. We sincerely believe it is one of the new 52's best arcs, and comic fans should not miss out on this experience. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.